The wind howled across the barren surface of Kepler 442c, carrying with it the bitter cold that had claimed 17 lives in the past week alone. Lieutenant Sarah Chun pulled her thermal coat tighter around her shoulders as she made her morning rounds through the sprawling refugee camp that had become humanity's last desperate foothold on this frozen world. The camp stretched for kilometers in every direction, a patchwork of hastily erected shelters, salvaged spacecraft hulls, and emergency habitat domes. What had started as a temporary way station for the survivors of Earth's destruction had become a permanent settlement of desperation. 30,000 souls huddled together against the alien winter, their breath forming crystalline clouds in the -40 atmosphere. Sarah's boots crunched through the ice-crusted ground as she approached the medical sector. Dr. Martinez emerged from the largest medical tent, his face grim beneath his frost-covered beard. They had worked together for 2 years now, ever since the evacuation fleet had been forced to make this emergency landing when their ship's engines failed. "How many today?" Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. "3 more during the night," Martinez replied, stripping off his surgical gloves with hands that trembled from both cold and exhaustion. "Hypothermia, all of them. The heating units in Sector 7 are completely dead now. We've tried everything to repair them, but we simply don't have the parts." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of command pressing down on her shoulders like the crushing cold around them. As the senior military officer among the survivors, she had somehow become the de facto leader of this frozen hell. It was a responsibility she had never asked for, but one she couldn't abandon. The refugee camp had been established in haste when the colony ship Prometheus had suffered catastrophic engine failure while passing through the Kepler 442 system. The ship had been carrying survivors from Earth's final days, when the Zephyrian Empire had descended from the stars like avenging angels, their advanced technology turning humanity's greatest cities to glass in a matter of hours. Sarah remembered that day with crystal clarity. She had been stationed at Luna Base when the first reports came in. Sydney, gone in a flash of alien fire. Moscow, Beijing, London, all reduced to radioactive craters. The Zephyrians had given no warning, no demands, no explanation. They had simply arrived and begun the systematic extermination of the human race. The evacuation had been a miracle of human engineering and sacrifice. In the span of 6 months, humanity had managed to build and launch 47 colony ships, each carrying between 20 and 50,000 survivors. It was the largest evacuation in human history, a desperate gamble to preserve their species among the stars. The Prometheus had been one of the last ships to leave the dying Earth, overloaded with refugees and running on jury-rig systems. They had made it 300 light-years before the inevitable happened. The overworked fusion drives had finally given out, leaving them stranded in orbit around this iceball planet that barely qualified as habitable. The initial landing had been controlled chaos. Emergency shelters had been deployed, while teams worked frantically to salvage what they could from the dying ship. The plan had been to establish a temporary base while they repaired the Prometheus, but weeks had turned to months, and months had turned to years. Now, as Sarah looked out over the camp, she saw the evidence of their gradual decline everywhere. Children played between the shelters, their laughter thin and brittle in the cold air. Adults moved with the careful, deliberate motions of people conserving every calorie, every unit of body heat. The lucky ones had managed to secure spots in the few heated buildings. The rest made do with whatever warmth they could generate or steal. "Ma'am," a voice called from behind her. Sarah turned to see Corporal Rodriguez approaching, his young face red with cold. "The council is requesting your presence at the morning briefing." Sarah nodded and followed Rodriguez toward the command center, a large prefabricated building that served as both military headquarters and civilian government center. The council consisted of 12 elected representatives from different sectors of the camp, along with department heads for engineering, medical, security, and resources. Inside the command center, the blessed warmth hit her like a physical force. The building was one of only 3 in the entire camp that maintained a comfortable temperature, powered by the camp's main fusion reactor. Sarah often felt guilty about the luxury, but the council had voted to maintain the command center's heating to ensure that critical decisions weren't made by people suffering from hypothermia-induced confusion. The briefing room was crowded with worried faces. Maria Santos, the elected camp president, stood at the head of the table, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. Around her sat the other council members, each representing a different crisis that threatened their survival. "Thank you for coming, Lieutenant," Santos said formally. "I'm afraid our situation has become critical." Chief Engineer Walsh cleared his throat and activated the wall display, showing a schematic of the camp's power grid. "Our main reactor is operating at 60% capacity and dropping. We've been cannibalizing parts from non-essential systems, but we're running out of options. At the current rate of decline, we'll lose main power completely within 2 weeks." The words hit the room like a physical blow. Without main power, the water recycling systems would fail, the food processors would shut down, and the few remaining heated buildings would become as cold as the rest of the camp. "What about the backup generators?" asked Dr. Martinez. "Already offline," Walsh replied grimly. "We've been using their components to keep the main reactor running. The fusion containment field requires specific rare Earth elements that we simply don't have access to on this planet." "What about rationing the power we have left?" suggested Councilor Jackson, who represented the agricultural sector. "Maybe if we shut down non-essential systems entirely." "We've already done that," Walsh interrupted. "Life support, water recycling, and minimal heating for the medical center and nursery. That's all we're running now, and it's still not enough." Sarah studied the power grid diagram, her military training automatically searching for solutions. "What would we need to restore full power?" "A miracle," Walsh said bitterly. "Or about 2 tons of processed iridium platinum composite, the kind of advanced materials that only exist in Zephyrian technology." The room fell silent at the mention of their destroyers. The Zephyrians were the reason they were here, freezing and dying on this remote world. Their technology was centuries ahead of humanity's, their ships powered by exotic matter and energy sources that human science could barely comprehend. "There might be another option," said a quiet voice from the corner of the room. Everyone turned to look at Dr. Elena Vasquez, the camp's chief scientist and former professor of xenobiology from Cambridge University. "Go on," Santos urged. Dr. Vasquez stood slowly, her thin frame wrapped in multiple layers of clothing. 3 months ago, our long-range sensors detected the crash site of what appears to be a Zephyrian scout ship, approximately 200 kilometers northwest of here. The energy signature suggests that parts of the ship's power core may still be intact. The implications hung in the air like a live wire. A Zephyrian ship would contain technology far beyond anything humanity had ever developed. Its power core alone could probably provide enough energy to keep the entire camp running for decades. "That's suicide," Counselor Thompson said immediately. "Even if the ship is abandoned, Zephyrian technology is booby-trapped. And if there are survivors, then we die fighting instead of freezing," Sarah said quietly. "How many people will we lose if we do nothing, Doctor?" Martinez consulted his tablet grimly. "At the current rate of power loss and declining temperatures, I estimate we'll lose between 200 and 300 people per week once the main heating fails. The children and elderly will go first." Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach that had nothing to do with the planet's temperature. 300 people per week meant that half the camp would be dead within 3 months. All of them would be gone within 6. "The salvage mission would be extremely dangerous," she said, thinking out loud. "Zephyrian ships are heavily armed and defended even when crashed. We need a small, fast team with technical expertise and combat experience." "I volunteer to go," Dr. Vasquez said immediately. "I've studied Zephyrian technology more than anyone here. If there's a way to safely extract their power core, I can figure it out." "Absolutely not," Santos interjected. "Elena, you're too valuable to risk on a mission like this. If something happens to you, We lose our only expert on alien technology. With respect, Madam President, Sarah said, if we don't attempt this mission, Dr. Vasquez's expertise won't matter, because we'll all be dead. The debate continued for another hour, but the mathematics of survival were brutally simple. They could attempt a dangerous salvage mission with a small chance of success, or they could wait to die slowly as their power systems failed. In the end, the council voted unanimously to authorize the mission. As the meeting broke up, Sarah found herself walking alongside Dr. Vasquez toward the exit. The scientist was younger than Sarah had initially thought, probably in her early 40s, with intelligent dark eyes and prematurely gray hair that spoke of the stress they had all endured. "You don't have to do this," Sarah told her quietly. "I can take an engineering team and try to salvage what we can without fully understanding the technology." Dr. Vasquez shook her head. "Zephyrian tech is unlike anything we've ever encountered. It operates on principles of quantum mechanics and exotic matter manipulation that took me years to even partially understand. Without someone who knows what they're looking at, you'd be just as likely to trigger a containment breach that would kill you all." They stepped outside into the bitter wind, and Sarah immediately felt the cold seeping through her clothes despite the thermal linings. Around them, the camp continued its daily struggle for survival. People hurried between buildings with their heads down, conserving energy and body heat. Children played games that involved staying as close to heat sources as possible. "How long do you think we really have?" Sarah asked. "Less than the official estimates," Vasquez replied honestly. "The cold is affecting people's judgment, slowing their reflexes, making them more prone to accidents. And morale is breaking down. Yesterday, I heard someone suggest that we should start selecting who gets to stay in the heated buildings and who doesn't." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. She had seen what desperation could do to people, how quickly civilization could break down when survival was at stake. The camp was a powder keg waiting to explode, held together only by shared purpose and the hope that somehow, some way, they would find a solution. "Who else will you take on the mission?" Vasquez asked. "Small team," Sarah replied, her mind already working through the logistics. "Rodriguez for communications and technical support, Sergeant Kim for heavy weapons, maybe Thompson from engineering if he volunteers. For people maximum. Any more, and we risk losing too many if things go wrong. And transport, the Scout Rover. It's the only vehicle we have with enough range and cold weather capability. If we push it hard, we can make the trip in 36 hours each way." As they walked through the camp, Sarah noticed the small details that spoke of their gradual decline. Clothing hung on makeshift lines, frozen solid in the wind. People had started burning furniture and personal belongings for warmth. In Sector 4, a group of teenagers had built a small fire using books from the camp's library. It broke her heart to see knowledge literally going up in smoke, but she couldn't blame them. When the choice was between preserving human culture and preserving human lives, survival won every time. They stopped at the edge of the camp, where the makeshift perimeter fence marked the boundary between human civilization and the alien wilderness beyond. The landscape stretched away in all directions, an endless expanse of ice and snow broken only by the occasional rocky outcropping or frozen stream. 200 kilometers, Sarah murmured, studying the horizon. In this weather, that might as well be 2,000. The rover has thermal shielding and an emergency shelter system, Vasquez pointed out. If we're careful with the power management and don't run into any major obstacles, we should be able to make it. Sarah turned to study the scientist's face. "Why are you really volunteering for this? And don't tell me it's just about your technical expertise. Half the camp thinks this mission is suicide, and they're probably right." Vasquez was quiet for a long moment, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "I had a daughter," she said finally. "Emma. She was 12 when the Zephyrians attacked Earth. I was at a conference in Geneva when it happened. She was staying with her father in Los Angeles." Sarah didn't need to ask what had happened to Los Angeles. She had seen the satellite images before the communication satellites went dark. The city had been turned into a crater of molten glass, Its 8 million inhabitants vaporized in seconds. I've spent the last 3 years studying Zephyrian technology, trying to understand how they think, how their machines work, Vasquez continued. Not because I want to help them, but because I want to beat them. Every piece of their technology one can understand is a weapon we can potentially use against them. Revenge. Justice, Vasquez corrected firmly. They destroyed our world without provocation, without warning, without mercy. They tried to commit genocide against the entire human race. If there's even a chance that their own technology can be turned against them, then I have to take it. Sarah nodded slowly, understanding the fire she saw in the scientist's eyes. It was the same fire that had kept her going through 2 years of gradual decline and mounting desperation. The need to strike back, to prove that humanity wouldn't go quietly into extinction. They stood in silence for several minutes, watching the alien sunset paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. The camp's lights were beginning to twinkle to life behind them, tiny points of warmth and hope in the gathering darkness. "When do we leave?" Vasquez asked. "Tomorrow at dawn," Sarah replied. "I want to brief the team tonight and make final preparations. The weather forecast shows a possible storm front moving in from the west, so we need to get ahead of it." As they walked back toward the command center, Sarah's mind was already working through the mission parameters. Equipment lists, contingency plans, communication schedules. It was the kind of detailed planning that had kept her alive through 2 years of military operations, and it might be the only thing that could save them all now. The command center was buzzing with activity when they returned. Word of the mission had spread through the camp like wildfire, and people were already volunteering to help with preparations. Sarah was both gratified and worried by the response. Hope was a powerful thing, but it could also be dangerous when it led people to take unnecessary risks. She spent the evening in meetings with her chosen team members, going over maps and technical specifications. Rodriguez was eager, but nervous, his youth showing in the way he double-checked every piece of equipment. Sergeant Kim was her usual stoic self, methodically cleaning her weapons and reviewing tactical scenarios. Thompson from engineering had volunteered despite his wife's objections, driven by the same desperation that motivated them all. As midnight approached, Sarah found herself alone in her small quarters, staring at a photograph of Earth that she kept on her desk. It showed her hometown of Portland, Oregon, green and peaceful under a blue sky that no human would ever see again. The picture had been taken 3 years ago, just weeks before the invasion began. She wondered sometimes if there were other survivor camps scattered among the stars, other groups of refugees struggling to rebuild some semblance of human civilization. The evacuation fleet had been scattered to the cosmic winds, each ship heading for a different destination in the hope that at least some would survive to carry on the species. But tonight, Sarah's world had contracted to this single frozen camp and the desperate mission that might save or damn them all. Tomorrow, she would venture into the alien wilderness in search of salvation. Tonight, she could only pray that she would be strong enough to bring it home. The wind continued to howl outside her window, carrying with it the promise of the storm that was coming. In the morning, she would face the cold and the unknown dangers that waited in the crashed Zephyrian ship. But for now, she allowed herself one last moment of warmth, one last moment of hope before the real battle began. Dawn came gray and bitter across the ice fields of Kepler, 442c, the alien sun casting long shadows through the frozen mist that perpetually hung over the refugee camp. Sarah Chun stood beside the modified scout rover in the vehicle bay, watching her breath crystallize in the sub-zero air as she performed final equipment checks. The rover had been one of their most valuable salvage pieces from the Prometheus, a 6-wheeled, all-terrain vehicle designed for extended reconnaissance missions. Over the past 2 years, Chief Engineer Walsh and his team had modified it extensively for survival on this frozen world, adding extra insulation, emergency heat systems, and extended-range fuel cells. "Radio check, Lieutenant," Rodriguez called from inside the vehicle's cabin. His voice carried clearly through the communication system they had rigged between the rover and the camp's main transmitter. At 19, Rodriguez was the youngest member of their mission team, but His technical skills with communications and electronics had made him invaluable to their survival. "Clear copy, Rodriguez," Sarah replied, adjusting her own headset. "Dr. Vasquez, Sergeant Kim, Thompson, sound off." Each team member confirmed their equipment status in turn. Dr. Vasquez had packed every scanning device and analysis tool the camp possessed, along with detailed technical manuals on Zephyrian technology that she had compiled over the past 3 years. Sergeant Kim carried enough firepower to hold off a small army, her expression grim but determined. Thompson had brought portable engineering tools and power couplers that might allow them to interface human technology with alien systems. The entire camp seemed to have turned out to see them off. Sarah could see faces pressed against every window, families huddled together in the pre-dawn cold. Children waved mittened hands from their parents' arms. The weight of 30,000 hopes rested on their shoulders like a physical burden. President Santos approached the rover, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "The Council's final authorization," she said formally, handing Sarah a sealed document. "And our prayers go with you." "We'll bring back what we can," Sarah promised, accepting the document and tucking it into her jacket's inner pocket. "Keep the people together while we're gone. Don't let desperation take hold." Santos nodded, but Sarah could see the fear in her eyes. They all knew the mathematics of their situation. If this mission failed, if the team didn't return with working Zephyrian technology, the camp had perhaps 2 weeks before the power systems failed completely. After that, it would be a race between starvation and hypothermia to see which claimed the survivors first. The rover's engine rumbled to life, its modified fuel cells providing a steady hum of power. Sarah climbed into the driver's seat, familiarizing herself with the controls they had installed for long-range navigation. The dashboard displayed ambient temperature, power reserves, and GPS coordinates that would guide them across the alien wasteland to their destination. "All systems green," Thompson reported from the engineering station. "Fuel cells at 100%, heating systems operational, communications array fully functional. We have enough power for the round trip with approximately 18 hours of reserve." "Emergency supplies?" Sarah asked. 72 hours of food and water for 5 people, Kim replied, checking her list. "Emergency shelter, cold weather gear, medical kit, and enough ammunition to fight our way through hell if necessary." Dr. Vasquez looked up from her tablet, where she had been reviewing the sensor data they had collected on the crashed Zephyrian ship. Latest scans show the wreckage is still generating energy signatures consistent with an active power core. If we can extract even a portion of their technology intact, it should provide enough power to run our entire camp for decades. "And if their security systems are still active?" Rodriguez asked nervously. "Then we improvise," Sarah said grimly, engaging the rover's drive system. "Everyone ready?" A chorus of confirmations echoed through the cabin. Sarah released the parking brake and eased the rover forward through the camp's main gate and out into the frozen wilderness beyond. The landscape that stretched before them was both beautiful and terrifying. Endless fields of ice and snow extended to the horizon, broken only by occasional rock formations that thrust up from the frozen ground like the bones of some ancient giant. The sky was a pale gray dome, heavy with the promise of the storm that weather sensors had detected moving in from the west. As they drove, Sarah found herself thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. The Prometheus had been humanity's last great hope, carrying 30,000 survivors from the ruins of Earth toward a new world where they might rebuild their civilization. Instead, they had crash-landed on this frozen ball of ice, their dreams of a new beginning transformed into a daily struggle for survival. The Zephyrians had appeared without warning 3 years ago, their sleek silver ships materializing in Earth's skies like harbingers of apocalypse. They had offered no communication, no demands, no explanation for their presence. They had simply begun the systematic destruction of human civilization with weapons that turned matter itself into energy. Sarah had been a junior officer at Lunabase when the first reports came in. Sydney vanishing in a pillar of light. Moscow reduced to a crater of molten glass. London, Paris, Tokyo, all gone in the span of a few hours. The attack had been so swift and merciless that most of humanity had died without ever understanding why. The evacuation had been a miracle of human engineering and desperation. In the months following the initial attack, as Zephyrian ships systematically destroyed every major population center on Earth, humanity's finest minds had worked around the clock to build a fleet of colony ships. They had cannibalized space stations, asteroid mining platforms, and orbital habitats to create vessels capable of carrying humanity's survivors to the stars. 47 ships had launched in the final evacuation, each carrying between 20 and 50,000 refugees. They had scattered to the cosmic winds, each heading for a different star system in the hope that at least some would survive to continue the human species. The Prometheus had been one of the last to leave, overloaded with refugees, and running on systems that were already failing. They had made it 300 light-years before the inevitable happened. Engine failure had stranded them in this system, forcing an emergency landing on the only marginally habitable planet they could reach. Now, 2 years later, they were attempting something that would have been unthinkable during the evacuation. They were going to salvage Zephyrian technology, the same advanced systems that had nearly driven humanity to extinction, and use it to save the lives of their people. Contact bearing 270, Rodriguez announced suddenly, checking his scanner display. Large metallic mass, consistent with spacecraft wreckage. Sarah adjusted their heading slightly, following the navigation display toward their target. Through the rover's reinforced windshield, she could see a dark shape on the horizon, gradually resolving itself into the unmistakable outline of a crashed starship. The Zephyrian scout vessel was larger than Sarah had expected, perhaps 200 meters long and 60 meters wide. Its sleek, organic-looking hull had been partially buried in the ice, but enough remained visible to reveal the distinctive flowing lines and crystalline structures that characterized Zephyrian design. Even crashed and abandoned, the ship radiated an aura of technological sophistication that made human engineering look primitive by comparison. "Jesus," Thompson whispered, staring at the wreckage through binoculars. "Look at the hull composition. It's like they grew this thing instead of building it." Dr. Vasquez was already taking readings with her scanner array. "Fascinating. The hull material appears to be some kind of biometallic composite, probably self-repairing under normal circumstances. The crash damage has overwhelmed its regenerative capacity, but I'm still reading active energy signatures from multiple internal systems." Sarah brought the rover to a stop about 100 meters from the wreckage, positioning them behind a large ice formation that would provide some cover if the ship's defensive systems were still active. Through her binoculars, she could see that the scout ship had buried itself nose first in the ice, its rear sections twisted and broken but still relatively intact. "No signs of life," Kim reported, scanning the wreckage through her rifle scope. "No movement, no thermal signatures, no active weapons systems that I can detect." "The crash happened approximately 3 months ago," Vasquez said, checking her readings. "Based on the energy decay patterns, I'd estimate that most of the ship's occupants were either killed in the impact or died shortly afterward from exposure to our atmosphere." Sarah felt a grim satisfaction at that news. The Zephyrians had shown no mercy when they attacked Earth, and she had no intention of extending any to them. If there were survivors in that wreck, they would be eliminated without hesitation. "Approach plan?" she asked her team. "I recommend a careful reconnaissance first," Kim suggested. "Thompson and I advance on foot while Rodriguez maintains overwatch from the rover. Dr. Vasquez can begin her scans once we've confirmed the wreck is secure." It was a solid tactical plan, and Sarah approved it with a nod. Kim and Thompson began suiting up in their heavy cold-weather gear, checking their weapons and communication equipment. The ambient temperature outside was nearly minus 50 Celsius, cold enough to kill an unprotected human in minutes. As her team prepared for the approach, Sarah found herself studying the crashed ship with a mixture of fear and anticipation. Somewhere in that twisted wreckage lay technology that could save her people or doom them all. Zephyrian power cores were notoriously unstable when damaged, and the ship's defensive systems might still be active despite the crash. Ready to move, Kim reported, adjusting her thermal rifle and checking her ammunition count. Thompson carried a heavy pack filled with cutting tools and power analyzers, along with a sidearm that he hoped he wouldn't need to use. Rodriguez, maintain constant communication, Sarah ordered. If anything goes wrong, you get on the radio and call for immediate extraction. Don't try to be a hero. The young technician nodded nervously, his hands steady on the rover's controls despite his obvious fear. Sarah climbed out of the driver's seat and checked her own equipment one final time. As team leader, she would accompany Kim and Thompson on the initial reconnaissance while Rodriguez and Vasquez remained with the rover. The cold hit them like a physical blow as soon as they stepped outside. Even through their heavy thermal suits, Sarah could feel the alien winter trying to seep into her bones. The wind carried particles of ice that stung any exposed skin, and their breath formed clouds that froze almost instantly in the bitter air. They approached the wreckage in a tactical formation, weapons ready, and eyes scanning for any sign of movement or active systems. The crashed ship loomed larger and larger as they drew closer, its alien hull gleaming dully in the gray light of the alien sun. Up close, the technological sophistication of the Zephyrian vessel was even more impressive. The hull material appeared to be a seamless fusion of metal and organic components, with flowing lines that seemed to follow some aesthetic principle completely alien to human sensibilities. Strange symbols were etched into the surface, glowing faintly with their own internal light. Breach in the rear hull section, Kim reported quietly, gesturing toward a gaping hole where the ship had been torn open during the crash. Looks like our best entry point. Sarah nodded and led the way toward the breach, her weapon at the ready. The interior of the ship was dark and filled with a strange, opalescent mist that seemed to move with a life of its own. Emergency lighting systems cast an eerie blue glow over corridors that curved and branched in patterns that hurt the human eye to follow. Atmosphere is breathable but toxic, Thompson reported, checking his scanner. High concentrations of xenon and trace amounts of organic compounds I can't identify. We'll need to keep our suits sealed. They moved deeper into the ship, following what appeared to be a main corridor toward the center of the vessel. The walls were lined with crystalline structures that might have been computer systems or decorative elements. With Zephyrian technology, the distinction was often meaningless. Bodies, Kim announced quietly, indicating a side chamber where several alien figures lay motionless on the deck. Sarah approached cautiously, studying humanity's destroyers for the first time up close. The Zephyrians were tall and graceful, with elongated limbs and faces that were hauntingly beautiful despite their alien features. Their skin had a pale, translucent quality that seemed to shimmer with internal light, and their large eyes were closed in permanent sleep. They're actually kind of beautiful, Thompson observed quietly. Hard to believe something so elegant could be so destructive. Beauty doesn't excuse genocide, Sarah replied coldly, moving past the bodies toward their objective. Dr. Vasquez, are you reading this? Copy, Lieutenant, came the scientist's voice through their communication system. I'm getting detailed scans of the ship's internal structure. The power core appears to be located in the central section, approximately 50 meters from your current position. They pressed deeper into the ship, following Vasquez's directions through corridors that seemed to shift and change when they weren't looking directly at them. The Zephyrian technology was unlike anything human engineers had ever encountered, operating on principles that seemed to blur the line between science and art. Contact ahead, Kim whispered suddenly, raising her rifle. Movement in the central chamber. Sarah felt her heart rate spike as they approached the power core chamber. If there were Zephyrian survivors, this was where they would make their last stand. But as they rounded the final corner, they found something far stranger than enemy combatants. The power core chamber was a vast spherical space at the heart of the ship, dominated by a crystalline structure that pulsed with contained energy. But surrounding the core were dozens of smaller crystals, each one containing what appeared to be a human figure suspended in some kind of stasis field. "My God," Thompson breathed, staring at the preserved humans. "They're prisoners." The Zephyrians were taking prisoners. Sarah moved closer to examine the stasis pods, her mind racing with the implications. If the Zephyrians were capturing humans instead of simply killing them, there might be camps of human slaves scattered throughout their territory. The war might not be as hopeless as they had believed. "Dr. Vasquez, are you getting this?" she asked into her communicator. "Affirmative, Lieutenant. This changes everything. If we can reverse engineer the stasis technology, we might be able to preserve our own people until we can find a more suitable world for colonization." But even as Sarah studied the imprisoned humans, her attention was drawn to the power core itself. The crystalline structure was beautiful beyond description, a fusion of technology and art that seemed to capture and focus the fundamental forces of the universe. Energy flowed through its faceted surfaces in patterns too complex for the human mind to fully comprehend. "Power readings are off the charts," Thompson reported, checking his scanner. "This thing could power our entire camp for centuries, maybe millennia. But I have no idea how to safely extract it." "Leave that to me, Dr. Vasquez's voice crackled through their communicators. "I'm suiting up and coming in. Rodriguez, maintain watch and be ready to call for extraction if anything goes wrong." As they waited for the scientists to join them, Sarah found herself staring at one of the stasis pods. The human inside appeared to be a young woman, probably in her 20s, with dark hair and features that reminded Sarah of someone she had once known. The woman's eyes were closed, her face peaceful in artificial sleep, but Sarah could see the intelligence and determination that lay beneath the surface. Who was she? Where had the Zephyrians captured her? Were there others like her, scattered throughout the alien empire, waiting for rescue that might never come? Dr. Vasquez arrived 20 minutes later, her scientific instruments gleaming in the eerie light of the power core chamber. She immediately began taking detailed readings of both the power core and the stasis pods, her excitement obvious despite the dangers they faced. "Incredible," she murmured, studying the energy patterns flowing through the crystalline structure. "The power core is actually a contained microsingularity, held in check by quantum field manipulators. The energy output is virtually limitless, but the containment system is incredibly delicate. Can we extract it safely?" Sarah asked. "Not the core itself," Vasquez replied, shaking her head. "Any attempt to remove it would probably cause a containment breach that would vaporize everything within a 1,000-kilometer radius. But I think I can tap into the power flow and reroute some of the energy to portable storage units." She began setting up her equipment, connecting human-made power couplers to the alien energy distribution system with the careful precision of a surgeon. Sarah watched nervously, knowing that one mistake could kill them all and doom the refugee camp to a slow death by freezing. "Got it," Vasquez announced finally, as her storage units began to glow with captured energy. "I've managed to siphon off approximately 10% of the core's output. It should be enough to restore full power to our camp and provide a substantial reserve for future emergencies." But even as they prepared to leave with their prize, Sarah found herself reluctant to abandon the imprisoned humans. They represented hope, proof that other survivors existed, that the war against the Zephyrians wasn't hopeless after all. "We can't leave them here," she said finally. "If there's any chance we can revive them safely." "The stasis system is tied into the ship's main power grid," Vasquez explained. "If we try to move them, we risk losing them all. But if I can interface our systems with theirs, we might be able to maintain the stasis fields long enough to transport them back to camp. It would be risky, adding complexity to an already dangerous operation. But Sarah couldn't bring herself to abandon fellow humans to the cold embrace of the alien ship. "Do it," she ordered. "We're not leaving anyone behind." As Vasquez worked to establish the interface, Sarah found herself thinking about the implications of their discovery. If the Zephyrians were taking prisoners, it suggested that their motives were more complex than simple genocide. They wanted humans for something: labor, experimentation, or purpose is too alien for human minds to understand. The thought filled her with both hope and dread. Hope, because it meant that other human survivors might exist somewhere in Zephyrian territory. Dread, because it suggested that the aliens saw humanity as useful enough to preserve, which implied a future of slavery rather than extinction. But those were concerns for another day. Right now, Sarah's focus was on getting her team and their prizes back to the refugee camp safely. The storm front was still approaching from the west, and they needed to be clear of the wreckage site before the weather made travel impossible. Interface established, Vasquez announced. About portable power cells feeding the stasis pods. We should be able to maintain them for at least 48 hours, which gives us time to set up proper support systems back at camp. The extraction took another 3 hours, carefully removing the stasis pods from their alien mountings and loading them onto portable sleds they had brought for the purpose. The power storage units were easier to transport, but required delicate handling to prevent energy discharge that could fry every electronic system in the rover. By the time they finished loading their salvage and began the journey back to camp, the first snowflakes of the approaching storm were beginning to fall. Sarah pushed the rover as hard as she dared, racing against both time and whether to bring hope back to her people. Behind them, the crashed Zephyrian ship gradually disappeared into the swirling snow, its secrets partially revealed, but its greater mysteries still intact. Sarah knew they would return someday, when they had the resources and knowledge to fully explore the alien vessel. But for now, they had what they needed to survive. The journey home would test them all, but Sarah felt a confidence she hadn't experienced in months. They had struck a blow against their enemies and claimed a victory that would ensure their people's survival. The war against the Zephyrians was far from over, but for the first time since Earth's destruction, humanity had reason to hope. The storm hit them 40 kilometers from the refugee camp, transforming the frozen wasteland into a howling nightmare of wind and ice. Sarah gripped the rover's steering controls as visibility dropped to near zero, relying on GPS navigation and pure instinct to keep them on course through the blizzard. "Can't see anything," Rodriguez called from his monitoring station, watching the radar display that showed nothing but static interference from the storm. "The communication array is completely blind in this weather." The rover bucked and shuddered as hurricane-force winds tried to lift the six-wheeled vehicle from the ground. Sarah had activated the magnetic anchoring system that locked the wheels to any ferrous material beneath the ice, but even that wasn't enough to completely stabilize their passage through the storm. In the passenger compartment, Dr. Vasquez worked frantically to maintain the stasis fields that kept their rescued humans alive. The portable power cells were draining faster than anticipated, their efficiency reduced by the extreme cold that seeped through even the rover's enhanced thermal shielding. "Power cells at 60%, she reported, her voice tight with concentration. "At this rate, we'll lose stasis integrity in approximately 6 hours. "How far to camp?" Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. 38 kilometers, Thompson replied, checking their GPS position against the map display. "At our current speed, we're looking at another 4 hours minimum." The mathematics were brutal. They would reach camp with perhaps 2 hours of stasis power remaining, assuming the portable cells didn't fail completely in the worsening cold. Sarah pushed the rover's engine harder, but the treacherous ice and howling wind made any significant increase in speed impossible. "Lieutenant," Kim said quietly from her position at the sensor station, "I'm picking up movement signatures behind us. Multiple contacts approximately 5 kilometers back and closing." Sarah felt her blood turn to ice water. "Zephyrian? Unknown." The storm interference makes positive identification impossible, but the movement patterns are consistent with powered vehicles. The implications were terrifying. If Zephyrian forces were pursuing them, the aliens must have detected their presence at the crash site. The refugees had always known this was a possibility, but they had hoped the scout ship was too damaged to send distress signals. "Options?" Sarah asked her team, though she suspected they had very few. "We could try to outrun them," Rodriguez suggested nervously. "The rover has good speed on flat ground." "Not in this storm," Thompson countered. We're already pushing our luck just staying on course. If we lose control at high speed, we're all dead. What about defensive positions? Kim asked, checking her weapons inventory. Find some cover and make a stand? Dr. Vasquez looked up from the stasis monitoring systems, her face pale in the blue glow of the displays. If we stop to fight, these people die. The power cells won't last more than 6 hours, and a firefight could damage the portable generators. Sarah weighed their options as the rover continued its lurching progress through the blizzard. They could try to reach camp and hope their pursuers lost the trail in the storm. They could stop and fight, accepting the probable loss of their rescued humans in exchange for a chance to eliminate the Zephyrian threat. Or they could attempt some kind of compromise that might save both their mission and their lives. Contact camp, she ordered Rodriguez. Emergency protocols. Tell them we're incoming hot with possible hostiles in pursuit. Rodriguez tried for several minutes to establish communication, but the storm's electromagnetic interference made it impossible to reach their base. They were on their own, racing through the frozen darkness with death close behind. The pursuit became visible 20 minutes later, when lightning from the storm briefly illuminated the landscape behind them. Sarah caught a glimpse of sleek, silver shapes moving across the ice with inhuman grace, their forms barely visible against the swirling snow. Zephyrian scout bikes, Kim identified, studying them through her scope during another lightning flash. 3 of them, maybe 4, fast and maneuverable but lightly armored. Sarah knew about Zephyrian scouts from the intelligence briefings during the evacuation from Earth. The aliens used small, high-speed vehicles for reconnaissance and pursuit, crewed by their most skilled pilots and warriors. A single scout bike could take down a human-made battle tank if handled properly. They're gaining, Thompson reported, monitoring their rear sensors. Estimate contact in approximately 30 minutes at current rates. The rover crested a low hill and began descending into a valley that offered some protection from the worst of the wind. Sarah took advantage of the improved conditions to push their speed higher, but she knew it wouldn't be enough. The Zephyrian vehicles were simply too fast and too advanced for human utility rover to outrun. Dr. Vasquez, she called back. How quickly can you transfer the rescued humans to emergency stasis containers? The scientist understood immediately. 5 minutes if I have help. But the emergency containers only have 2 hours of power each. Do it, Sarah ordered. Kim, Thompson, assist Dr. Vasquez. Rodriguez, take over navigation and keep us moving. As her team worked to transfer their precious cargo to more portable containers, Sarah's mind raced through tactical possibilities. The valley they were traversing offered several potential ambush sites, places where superior firepower might offset the aliens' technological advantages. But any firefight would expose their rescued humans to potentially fatal damage. Transfer complete, Vasquez announced. 4 emergency stasis containers, each with approximately 2 hours of independent power. Kim, what's our weapons situation? The sergeant checked her inventory grimly. 2 assault rifles, 1 heavy plasma cutter that Thompson rigged for combat use, and about 300 rounds of ammunition, plus whatever explosives we have left from the salvage operation. It wasn't much to face Zephyrian technology, but Sarah had learned during the evacuation that human determination could sometimes overcome alien advantages. The key was choosing the right time and place to make their stand. There, she said, pointing toward a narrow defile ahead, where massive ice formations created a natural choke point. We make our stand at the bottleneck. Kim, can you set up a crossfire pattern? The sergeant studied the terrain through her scope, calculating angles and fields of fire. Possible. If I position myself on the left ridge with the heavy rifle and Thompson takes the right side with a plasma cutter, we can create overlapping fields of fire that should channel them into a kill zone. And if they have heavy weapons? Rodriguez asked nervously. Then we die fighting instead of freezing, Sarah replied, echoing her words from the council meeting that seemed like a lifetime ago. But we give our people every chance to survive. She brought the rover to a stop behind the largest ice formation, positioning it to provide maximum cover while still allowing access to their equipment. The wind was beginning to die down as they reached the valley floor, but the snow continued to fall in thick, heavy flakes that would limit visibility for both sides. Kim and Thompson rapidly deployed to their assigned positions, carrying heavy weapons and ammunition through the knee-deep snow. Dr. Vasquez secured the stasis containers in the rover's most protected compartment, while Rodriguez tried unsuccessfully to establish communication with the camp. Still no contact, the young technician reported. The storm interference is too strong. Sarah checked her chronometer. They were still 3 hours from the camp, assuming they could break contact with their pursuers and resume travel. The emergency stasis containers would keep their rescued humans alive for at least that long, but only if the power cells didn't fail in the extreme cold. Movement. Kim's voice crackled through their short-range communicators. 3 contacts approaching from the south, approximately 1 kilometer out. Sarah raised her binoculars and scanned the direction Kim had indicated. At first she saw nothing but swirling snow and ice, but then the alien vehicles resolved themselves from the storm like ghosts materializing from another dimension. The Zephyrian scout bikes were beautiful in their deadliness, sleek silver shapes that seemed to flow across the ground without touching it. Each one was piloted by a single alien warrior, their tall forms clearly visible through the transparent canopies that protected them from the elements. "Weapons hot," Sarah ordered, settling into position behind the rover with her assault rifle. "Wait for my signal. Let them get into the kill zone before we open fire." The aliens approached cautiously, clearly aware that they were entering potential ambush terrain. Their vehicles moved with fluid grace, splitting up to approach from multiple angles while maintaining overlapping fields of fire. Sarah held her breath as the lead scout bike entered the defile, its pilot scanning the ice formations for signs of hidden enemies. The alien was magnificent and terrifying, tall and graceful even while seated in the vehicle's control position. Its large eyes swept the terrain with predatory intelligence, looking for the humans it knew were hidden somewhere nearby. "Now," Sarah whispered into her communicator. Kim's heavy rifle spoke first, sending a plasma bolt screaming across the valley to impact the lead scout bike's left flank. The alien vehicle staggered under the impact, but didn't go down, its advanced armor absorbing most of the energy. Thompson's jury-rigged plasma cutter joined the firefight a moment later, carving a brilliant line of energy across the second bike's path. The alien pilot twisted away from the attack with inhuman reflexes, but not before the plasma caught the vehicle's rear stabilizer and sent it spinning across the ice. Sarah added her own fire to the barrage, stitching bullets across the third scout bike's approach vector. Her conventional ammunition sparked harmlessly off the alien armor, but it forced the pilot to take evasive action that disrupted its attack run. The Zephyrians responded with weapons that turned the air itself into a deadly medium. Energy beams that looked like captured lightning struck the ice around the human positions, sending up geysers of superheated steam. Where the beams touched solid rock, the stone simply ceased to exist, vaporized at the molecular level. "Jesus," Rodriguez breathed from his position beside the rover. "What kind of weapons are those?" "The kind that destroyed Earth," Sarah replied grimly, ducking as another energy beam passed close enough to singe her hair. "Keep your head down and be ready to move." The firefight continued for almost 10 minutes, humans and aliens trading devastating fire across the frozen valley. Kim's heavy rifle claimed the second scout bike, punching through its armor to detonate the power core in a spectacular explosion that lit up the entire defile. Thompson managed to disable the third bike's weapon system, but the vehicle itself remained mobile and dangerous. The lead scout bike proved to be the most dangerous, its pilot demonstrating skills that bordered on supernatural. The alien managed to close to within 50 meters of the rover before Kim's final shot found its mark, punching through the canopy to eliminate the pilot. Sudden silence fell over the valley, broken only by the wind and the crackle of burning alien technology. Sarah waited for several minutes, scanning for additional threats, before ordering her team to regroup at the rover. "Casualties," she called as Kim and Thompson returned from their positions. Thompson took some shrapnel from a near miss, Kim reported. Nothing serious, but he'll need medical attention once we reach camp. Thompson was indeed bleeding from several small cuts on his left arm, but he waved off their concern. I'm fine. More importantly, the stasis containers are intact. Our passengers are still stable. Dr. Vasquez checked the emergency power readings anxiously. Approximately 90 minutes remaining. We need to reach camp soon, or we'll lose them all. Sarah nodded and helped her team load their equipment back into the rover. The firefight had cost them precious time, but they had eliminated the immediate pursuit threat. Now, they just had to hope that no additional Zephyrian forces were converging on their location. The storm was beginning to clear as they resumed their journey, the howling wind gradually diminishing to a steady breeze that still cut through their thermal gear like a knife. Visibility improved enough for Sarah to push their speed higher, racing against time and the failing power cells that kept their rescued humans alive. Communication contact, Rodriguez announced suddenly. I'm picking up camp transmissions. Signal strength indicates we're approximately 20 kilometers out. Sarah felt a surge of relief that was immediately tempered by concern. 20 kilometers was still 40 minutes of travel time under current conditions, and the emergency stasis containers were showing critical power levels. Patch me through, she ordered. Camp Control, this is Salvage Team Alpha. We are inbound with critical cargo and emergency medical requirements. Prepare for immediate power distribution integration. The response came crackling through the static-filled channel. Salvage Alpha, this is Camp Control. Copy your transmission. Medical and engineering teams are standing by. What's your status? Mission successful, Sarah reported. We have salvaged alien power generation technology and rescued human survivors. ETA 20 minutes, but we need immediate technical support upon arrival. There was a pause before Camp Control responded, and Sarah could hear excited voices in the background. The news that they had succeeded in their mission would spread through the camp like wildfire, bringing hope to people who had been preparing for death. Understood, Salvage Alpha. President Santos sends her congratulations and wants to speak with you upon arrival. All departments are preparing for immediate implementation of salvage technology. The final approach to the refugee camp was the longest 20 minutes of Sarah's life. She could see the lights of the settlement growing brighter in the distance, while the power readings on the stasis containers dropped steadily toward zero. Dr. Vasquez worked frantically to squeeze every possible minute from the failing cells, but the mathematics were inexorable. 5 minutes of power remaining, she announced as they approached the camp's outer perimeter. If we don't get these containers connected to main power in the next few minutes, we're going to lose them. Sarah pushed the rover to its maximum safe speed, racing through the camp's gates and directly toward the medical center where teams of technicians were already waiting. She had barely brought the vehicle to a stop before Dr. Martinez and his staff were pulling the stasis containers from the rover's cargo compartment. Get them inside now, Sarah ordered. Dr. Vasquez supervised the power connection. Everyone else, help unload the energy storage units. The next hour was controlled chaos as the camp's technical teams worked to integrate the alien technology with their existing power grid. The energy storage units that Vasquez had filled from the Zephyrian power core contained more electrical potential than the entire camp had used in the past 6 months. Sarah stood in the command center, watching status displays that showed their power reserves climbing steadily toward full capacity for the first time since they had established the camp. Around her, the command staff worked with an enthusiasm she hadn't seen in months, their voices filled with hope and excitement. Power grid stabilized at 95% of nominal capacity. Chief Engineer Walsh reported with a grin that stretched from ear to ear. We have enough stored energy to run the entire camp at full power for approximately 18 months, even without any additional salvage. President Santos approached Sarah with tears in her eyes. Lieutenant, I don't know how to thank you. You've saved us all. Sarah accepted the congratulations, but her attention was focused on the medical center where Dr. Martinez and Dr. Vasquez were working to revive the humans they had rescued from the Zephyrian ship. The stasis containers had been connected to main power with less than 2 minutes to spare, and now came the delicate process of bringing the prisoners back to consciousness. First subject is responding, Dr. Martinez announced over the intercom. Vital signs are stabilizing, and brain activity is returning to normal levels. Sarah hurried to the medical center, arriving just as the first stasis pod began to crack open. Steam hissed from the crystalline structure as the alien preservation technology gradually released its hold on the human inside. The young woman Sarah had noticed in the Zephyrian ship opened her eyes slowly, blinking in confusion at the unfamiliar surroundings. She was probably in her 20s, with dark hair and intelligent eyes that immediately focused on Sarah with sharp awareness. "Where?" the woman began, her voice weak but determined. "Where am I?" "You're safe," Sarah said gently, moving closer to the pod. "You're in a human refugee camp. We rescued you from a Zephyrian ship." The woman struggled to sit up, her movements still sluggish from the effects of stasis. How long was I in there?" "We don't know," Dr. Martinez admitted. "The stasis technology is beyond our understanding. It could have been weeks or years." As the woman gradually regained her strength, other pods began opening around the medical center. One by one, the rescued humans emerged from their alien prison, each one disoriented but alive. There were 12 of them in total, men and women of various ages who had somehow survived capture by humanity's destroyers. "My name is Sarah Chun." Sarah introduced herself to the first woman. "I'm the military commander of this camp." "What's your name? Where were you captured?" "Elena Therese," the woman replied, her voice growing stronger. "I was a xenobiologist at the Mars Research Station when the Zephyrians attacked. They took about 50 of us prisoners before they destroyed the base." The implications were staggering. If the Zephyrians had captured people from Mars, they were taking prisoners from across human space. There might be thousands of human slaves scattered throughout the alien empire, waiting for rescue. "Do you know where they were taking you?" Sarah asked urgently. Any information about Zephyrian bases or prison facilities could be invaluable. Elena shook her head slowly. "They kept us in stasis most of the time. But I remember there was something they called a collection, a place where they were gathering specimens from different species across the galaxy." Dr. Vasquez looked up from her examination of another rescued prisoner. "A xenobiological research facility? That would explain why they're taking prisoners instead of simply killing everyone." As the rescued humans gradually regained their strength and began sharing their stories, a picture emerged of Zephyrian activities that was both terrifying and hopeful. The aliens were indeed conducting some kind of massive research project, gathering specimens from across the galaxy for purposes that remained unclear. But the existence of human prisoners also meant that the war was far from over. Somewhere in Zephyrian space, thousands of humans might still be alive, waiting for rescue. The refugee camp on Kepler, 442c, was no longer just a dying settlement struggling for survival. It had become a potential base for continuing the fight against humanity's destroyers. Sarah stood in the medical center, watching the rescued humans slowly adapt to their freedom, and felt a determination she hadn't experienced since the evacuation from Earth. They had struck one small blow against the Zephyrian Empire, but it was only the beginning. The real war was about to begin. Outside, the camp's lights burned brightly in the alien night, powered by energy stolen from humanity's enemies. For the first time in 2 years, every building was warm. Every system was fully operational, and every person had hope for the future. It was Christmas Eve on Kepler, 442c, and humanity had received the greatest gift of all, the knowledge that they were not alone, and the power to fight back.